Chairman French Hill.
I know who to call for the eulogy. Thank you for that kind introduction. Didn't Frank Wolf confirm to you why he's a national treasure? Thank you, Frank. We wouldn't have the commitment of the United States government so passionately in asserting that basic human freedom of religion without Frank's incredible work here in Congress and Tom Lantos and many others who dedicated so much of their time in public life, in public service to that most basic of human rights, which is that human right of association and freedom of religion. Great to be back with you, and great to have you back in the U.S. Capitol. For the decade I've been in Congress, I've always been dedicated to fighting for religious liberty in our own country as well as abroad, and certainly standing up for religious minorities as so eloquently just outlined by former Congressman Wolf. And a lot of that galvanization for the Coptic community in Egypt centered around the horrific events of 2015, when across the national news wires around the world saw the 21 Copts captured, killed, tortured, beheaded for refusing to renounce their Christian faith. These men were not soldiers, they weren't preachers, they were just ordinary people. They were laborers, fathers, dads, brothers, and in the face of unimaginable horror, they did not flinch. They did not renounce their faith. Their final words were prayers to Jesus Christ. And I think the whole world took inspiration from that. But we also took horror in it, that somebody could have that kind of brutal, sick attitude that was so pervasive, not only just in the Middle East, but around the world. So since that 2015 time, I think it's been a real galvanization, educational moment for policymakers here in Washington to remember that time. I bring greetings to you from St. George's Coptic Church in Little Rock. We are blessed with our expanding population in Little Rock and wish them well as they grow their parish home. And while the Coptic Christians are the largest religious minority in the Middle East, they continue to endure discrimination, violence, and systematic injustice in Egypt. On June 1st, I was encouraged to see President Trump honor Global Coptic Day. Some positive steps that the White House has taken to honor Coptic Christians and religious freedom include, President Trump's personal devotion to religious freedom, which is significant. And here at home, he's established the Religious Liberty Commission. He signed an executive order to eradicate anti-Christian bias in the United States. All of this is part of this social movement across our country here in America of secularism, which I think President Trump has really made it one of his personal objectives to stamp out, to stand for religious liberty, to stand with a central place for God in our lives, or not, but not to have the government demand the secularization, of a country founded like the United States, dedicated to religious liberty as a fundamental tenet. He's also, I think, headed in the right direction about the export of secularism, which in my work in the Intelligence Committee and former work on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I see everywhere I travel. I tell one of the most disturbing stories was a visit in 2023 to Erbil. I was up there on some House Intelligence Committee business, but I asked to see the Roman Catholic bishop, to ask him how things were going post-ISIS. How is the hospital in Mosul? How is the university in Mosul? How is the faith community in the north of Iraq. And he gave me such a wonderful report of both support from sovereign donors like USAID or the government in Budapest, but mostly it was about faithful Christians around the world helping those Christian faith communities in the north of Iraq rebuild their hospital, rebuild their school. And he reported to me that there were 1,000 kids back in school learning in a faith tradition in the north of Iraq. That was inspirational. Sitting in this meeting with me was our consular from the U.S. Embassy Consular Office. So it's me, my assistant in the consular offices in Erbil. The bishop has come to me for this meeting at my request to answer my questions about the faith community there. And our senior diplomat launches off into a lecture on DEI. Like what he was proud about was their efforts to have a gay marriage law and to have an abortion law. And I can't think of anything more insensitive in the front of a Roman Catholic bishop in a bilateral meeting to talk about the faith community, to have somebody spew Department of State talking points. That's just not sensitive to the time or place. You know, your parents taught you there's a time and place for everything. And I can't, tone deaf. And I hear it when I travel over the world. You know, we don't help the Ugandans build a new port. We let the Chinese do that because we want the Ugandans, which is a mostly Catholic country, the United States insists they have a gay marriage law. So this is, I think, on Trump's mind about America picking sides and not being sensitive to things like this about religious freedom. And I think that's good because I've seen it be so destructive in U.S. foreign policy in recent years. It's one thing to preach tolerance. It's one thing to preach pluralism. It's another thing to make aid contingent on a secular view that doesn't respect the country's cultural views. And that's a good point for me to segue into Egypt. Are we respecting Egypt's cultural views? No, because Egypt has a constitution that says that they respect religious freedom. They have a president that says they respect religious freedom. They have a court system that says they respect religious freedom. They have an agreement to reform their educational materials that says they respect religious freedom. Frank just touched on that. But what makes me tired, but never tired of advocacy, but tired as a human, is lip service, and where actions don't meet words. And when it comes to religious tolerance, that is the story over and over again, whether we're talking about a dusty road in the south of Nigeria, or whether we're talking about the people who live in Minya governance in Egypt. I think it's great that we have a good tone at the top in President Sisi. But a good tone at the top and Coptic historic trails and building a cathedral or meeting with the Pope, the top religious leader, those are good things, and we want that. But we also want religion off the driver's license in Egypt. We also want the judicial system in Egypt, the civil judicial system, to work to defend people on the street in Minya or in Cairo or anywhere else, live their life in freedom, respect their religion, respect their family traditions. People on the street doing nothing who are assaulted or murdered. And I'm not a big believer in reconciliation councils. I'm a big believer in taking bad people who violate the law to court and put them in jail. And I know people they try to put they want to say you're making progress, but we're not really making any progress. We're not, and that's why we have Coptic solidarity, and that's why you've got Frank Wolf and you've got me that aren't giving up on this topic, and we're not going to stop talking about it, and we're not going to stop reminding Secretary Rubio of the importance of it, or President Trump. And we're glad Egypt continues to try to be a force for good in a tough neighborhood with Jordan and Israel and other Gulf states to try to make sense of the insensible, which is the chaos in Gaza. But that doesn't mean that you get a free pass from these other responsibilities. Again, echoing Frank's comments about his views with George Shultz and Ronald Reagan. You can't have a police force that refuses to investigate, and you can't have a justice system that refuses to prosecute. And so I'm not impressed by Egypt's progress, and I can name a bunch of other countries I feel the same way about. But we have to continue to advocate and make that case before the House Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, House Foreign Affairs Committee here, that while we respect Egypt's role as a major ally to the U.S., we've got to see more than 5- and 6-year working projects to reform our textbooks. I'm glad they're modestly better, but Frank just reported to you they're not complete. What's so complicated by completing the step? And what's so complicated about a government that's definitely centrally directed from the president's office in Cairo from making an example of a repeat offender who has committed crimes against the Coptic Christian community? That doesn't seem very complicated to me, and it doesn't seem very revolutionary. It seems like you're matching actions with words. So if I had to pick a theme, that's what it would be. In 2023, I went down to Minya. I took Darren LaHood with me, great member of Congress from Illinois. And we drove that beautiful drive up the Nile to Minya, and we had a chance to meet with the deputy governor. The governor was off in the hospital somewhere having a medical procedure, and we met with the Coptic bishop there. And it was a good meeting. I walked away glad I met this famous man with his incredible encyclopedic Renaissance knowledge of religion and faith and what a role model he is for the Coptic Christians in Egypt. But I walked away just as dissatisfied as I went. And 2 weeks after I was there, the USEF committee dropped by for their annual visit. And their report came out in August of that year and argued that Egypt has to go beyond symbolic gestures promoting religious tolerance and instead institute systemic changes to its laws and criminal justice system. And that should be the bottom line. That should be that, quote, next step that the State Department and the administration advocate for. And there's not a B-team runner-up point of view to that, because we've already given them an A for effort at messaging, leadership, point of view. Important symbolism is important. Symbolism is important. You don't change a culture without leaders demonstrating, modeling good behavior. So I'm for it. But you're able to change a culture and deliver results for people and give people confidence in their public safety, in their love of country, if you enforce the law. and Egypt is in a position to enforce the law, and they should. So if you want to have a quick summary of what I'm personally focused on, that's what I'm focused on. So in my visits with the Egyptian ambassador here, or my travel to Egypt, that's where I'm going to continue my focus, and I hope you'll join me, and I hope you'll continue to communicate in the Senate and the House how important this is, and how we're not satisfied with what we have. We're not satisfied with what we have, and we've got to maintain that. And so thank you for always bringing your best suggestions to me. Thank you for always reaching out. Thank you for being a big supporter of the effort where we've tried to have strong bipartisan support here in the House in support of our religious minorities around the world, whether they're in Burma or Egypt or Syria or across the world. We're here for you, and again, we're here and we're focused on this work because of the pioneering effort and leadership by Frank Wolf. One of my happiest days in December was a phone call with, again, the Roman Catholic bishop in Aleppo, when he called me to say that what I was listening to in the background were the bells ringing for the first time in over 11 years in the cathedral in Aleppo as Christians felt safe to come out on the streets and worship. We had a delegation visit us from the Jewish community in Syria just a few days ago. Again, at this stage, talking about their ability to gather and worship in Damascus. But this is a fledgling situation that could turn for the worst at any moment in Syria. So I want Syria to be an example to the rest of the Middle East that people can come together after absolute decades of destruction, degradation, where Iranians and Russians conspire with a 50-year dictator family to murder children in the tens of thousands and imprison people. So just always remember those 21 cops on that beach in 2015, but think about those children being murdered just wantedly in hospitals by the Russians, the Iranians, and the Assad regime. And let that be a lesson that whether you're a Syriac Christian, a Roman Catholic Christian, a Jew, a Sunni, an Alawite, or a Shia citizen of Syria, it's time to come together and put an end to it and deliver on a promise that we can govern ourselves and we can offer hope for religious freedom in excluding Egypt, but one of the oldest Christian civilizations in the world in Aleppo and Damascus. Let's have hope for them. Let's keep them in our prayers as we keep all the Christian community in Egypt in our prayers. And thank you so much for letting me come by. Appreciate it.